My future mother-in-law sent me a letter revealing my husband only wanted my money and had a child I never knew, so with one cold move I shattered his entire life. I'm 25, and I thought he was 29, but he's not. We first met through a dating app, and he was really charming and sweet, so we started dating. He moved in with me 3 months after that because he thought the commute from his place to mine was unnecessarily long, and my place was also a lot closer to his workplace. I wasn't ready at the time, but he talked me into it somehow. Soon enough, I was making a lot of changes in my life to accommodate him. I was fine with it, though, because I loved him, and I thought he loved me too. We had a joint bank account within a year of being together, and I was paying for about 75% of his expenses because I earned more. For context, I'm the head of marketing at a firm and have a decent income, while he's a freelance graphic designer. He's been trying to make it big as a blogger but hasn't had any luck so far and relies on me heavily to cover his bills. He tends to splurge a lot, but whenever I brought that up, he talked to me real sweetly, and I'd melt. He asked me to get married 6 months ago, and I agreed, against my family's will. They didn't like him much because he was too dependent on me financially, but I thought that was just them being regressive. Men can rely on women financially too, so I fought with them over it and managed to get them to come around by the time we got hitched. He only has one parent that I know of, his dad, and doesn't have much family because his dad ran away from home when he got married to my boyfriend's mom. His parents got divorced when he was 13 because his mother had allegedly cheated on his dad with their neighbor. They moved away from that neighborhood afterward, and his dad took over his upbringing because, apparently, his mother didn't want custody of him anymore and only wanted to be with her new boyfriend. They haven't been in touch since then, and he doesn't know what she's been up to in these past years either. This is what he told me. A week before the wedding was supposed to take place, I started receiving a bunch of calls and texts from numbers and profiles I had never seen before. I ignored all of those because I thought it was just people trying to scam me or something, and I was very busy with the wedding prep too, so I had no time to worry about these things. On the day before the wedding, around the evening, a woman I didn't recognize showed up at my doorstep with a letter in her hand. My soon-to-be ex-husband was not at home because he was supposed to spend the night at the hotel we were getting married at so we wouldn't run into each other before the ceremony. I didn't recognize her, so I told her that I wasn't willing to have any guests over for the day. But she then told me that she was actually my husband's mom, my estranged mother-in-law-to-be, and said that she needed to talk to me about something very important. I didn't want to talk to her because I'd heard enough about her from my husband, so I turned her away very rudely. After she insisted on speaking to me, she tried to tell me that her son was not the guy I thought he was and asked me to leave him. She claimed she had proof and had explained everything in the letter she'd brought with her, but I got really irritated and slammed the door shut without even reading the letter. She left after a while, and I told my husband about it through text after she was gone. He told me that I'd done the right thing because his mother was a known liar and couldn't believe that she was back again to ruin his life. The next day, we got married without a hitch, and we forgot about his mom's visit to me the previous day. Nothing much had changed in the days following, but I began to receive many more calls, texts, and even emails, which I never bothered to read because I had zero interest in getting to know what that woman had to say. I knew about her alleged past, so I just assumed that whatever she had to say to me would be all lies anyway. Then, 3 days ago, I received a letter in my mail, which took me by surprise because it was the same one that I'd seen my mother-in-law with the other day. I could no longer ignore her attempts to get me to read her side of the story because nobody is this desperate without a reason. I'd taken a sick leave that day, and my husband had gone out to visit a couple of his friends, so it was just me alone at home, and the coast was clear for me to read the letter without any interruption. So, I started reading, and I'm so grateful that I didn't ignore her any longer because she most definitely saved me from my husband. She'd found my social media when a friend of hers told her that her son was now apparently engaged. Probably someone from my friend list was somehow related to my mother-in-law's friend, and that's how the news eventually made it to her. She did some stalking and managed to find out a lot about me, including my phone number, email address, and even my home address. She didn't tell me in her letter how she managed to do it, but it sure was creepy, and I almost threw it away then and there to get it out of my house. But I knew I had to finish reading somehow. Long story short, apparently my husband isn't the man I thought he was at all. He's 8 years older than me, not 4, like the way he'd led me to believe all these years. He can pass off as younger because he works out and just takes really good care of himself and his body. He's not a graphic designer at all but a con artist who preys on younger women, love bombs them, and gets them to pay for his expenses. Unfortunately, I'd been the only one stupid enough to take things as far as marriage. She attached proof of his birth as well as some texts that he'd exchanged with a couple of other women many years back, which is what led his mother to get divorced and make a run for it when she found out about their business of scamming women for their own greed. In fact, My husband apparently even had a 3-year-old son who lives with his ex-girlfriend, but he has to pay child support for him, which is being covered by me so far. She attached proof of that as well. The whole story that he'd fed me about his mother cheating and stuff had also been a lie, obviously. She told me that her son had never been to college and never worked but always seemed to have money on him and had even started paying rent and bills at home. So, she went digging through his phone and laptop and discovered his sources of money, which happened to be a bunch of women whom he was flirting with left, right, and center, telling them all sorts of lies to get them to send him some money. This was almost 15 to 20 years ago, so her memory isn't that great, but she does remember that even then he had no remorse about it and said that he just manipulated them, but their relationship had been consensual, so they couldn't hold it against him. And I guess that was true. His mom didn't like that, but his dad didn't see anything wrong with it and agreed that this was fair game as long as he brought the money home. So, that's why she filed for divorce and cut them out of her life. They moved out of the neighborhood they used to live in, and she lost track of them until 6 years back when his ex-girlfriend somehow found out where his mom lived and contacted her to tell her she was pregnant. My husband had borrowed some amount of money from the woman and then ghosted her, but once she discovered she was pregnant, she decided to track him down somehow, and they were able to do so after a couple of days with the help of the cops. She took him to court and made sure he paid child support, but lucky for him, he found me within a year of the verdict, and I became his new source of money. Even early on in the relationship, he used to borrow money from me almost every single day, but made sure it was small amounts so I wouldn't suspect anything. I never added it up, but if I were to do that now, it must have been a significant amount of money every week that he took from me. Then we set up a joint bank account too. We promised that we'd set aside 30% of our salaries there for the future, but of course, his 30% wasn't the same as my 30%, and I was the one contributing more. But I was okay with it because I loved him and was willing to keep money aside for our future, so I continued to do it without question. Only now am I realizing how incredibly stupid someone has to be to do something like that. I've been covering all his expenses for the last 2 years without taking into consideration that there's something very wrong with this whole arrangement that he's come up with. After I was done reading the letter, I immediately packed my essential belongings and some clothes, then got into my car and drove to a hotel a little out of town. I was shuddering the entire time, thinking about what I'd just discovered, and couldn't imagine being in that house one more second. I blocked my husband on my way there because I just didn't want to hear anything that he had to say at the moment. I just wanted to put as much distance as I could between me and him, so I just kept driving until I reached the hotel I'm currently in. Once I was there, I wasted no time and called up my dad to fill him in on whatever I'd found out. I thought that they'd tell me, "I told you so," but they didn't, so thank God for that because that would have been humiliating. I told him to put me in touch with a lawyer immediately because I wanted myself out of this mess at the earliest. Within 2 hours, my dad had put me in touch with his friend's son, who was a practicing attorney who specializes in divorces. I told him everything and sent him the letter and whatever proof my mother-in-law had attached as well. Just the day before, we'd filed the divorce petition. In the meantime, my husband had tried every single method in existence to talk to me, from making fake profiles and texting me to using his friends' phone numbers, but none of that had worked because I hung up and blocked people like nobody's business during the last 2 days. That brings us to today. I didn't want anyone to know where I was, so I'd only told my parents about it. But a few hours ago, I received a call from the front desk of the hotel that my husband was here to see me, and so I had to go down to talk to him. I didn't know how he'd found out where I was, but he told me that he'd visited every single hotel in the vicinity over the past 2 days to find out where I was so he could talk to me. Earlier, I might have found that romantic or endearing, but now it just felt creepy because he wasn't really looking for his wife, he was looking for the woman who paid all his bills, and that was it. I told him that we were done and that he'd be served with the divorce papers soon enough. He even had the audacity to ask me why, so I told him that I'd met his mother a couple of days back, and I expected him to look surprised, but instead, he just laughed and told me not to believe that old coot stories, that she just had it in for him and wanted to ruin him somehow, so she was going out of her way to stir up trouble for him. I didn't believe that and told him that I was going ahead with a divorce because I had proof that he was lying, and I trusted his mother more than him now that I could finally see the way he'd been scamming me. I said it out loud, and that's when he started looking really upset. He told me that I was making a mistake and that I'd regret this later, but I just stuck up my middle finger and walked off. He just texted like an hour ago from a different number, and I finally opened the text to read it. He said he was disappointed that I'd rather believe some woman I'd never met before over him, even after spending 2 whole years with him, and the way I turned him away today without even hearing his side of things had been very hurtful. Now I don't know who's telling the truth and whom to believe. I guess he does have a point about me choosing to believe his mother over him because I haven't known her for as long as him, and neither has she tried to contact me after the day I received the letter. but that's probably because this was a last-ditch effort to get me to pay heed to her. I'm torn about believing my estranged mother-in-law over my husband, whom I'd been with for 2 years. Hey, thank you so much for the response. I'm safe now, so thanks to everyone who is very worried about my safety. The hotel has pretty tight security, so nobody can get through without my prior consent. My husband knows where I am, true, but he cannot get to me, and I feel a lot better knowing that for sure. He's been served with the divorce papers but hasn't replied to them yet because he's probably still struggling to come to terms with the fact that he's lost me for good. He's been trying to talk to me constantly, but I'd warned him not to harass me, or I'd go to the cops, and that would be yet another feather in his cap. It's just been a week since I posted, and I've been receiving endless legal advice and messages, but there have also been people who have called me stupid and even said that I deserved all of this for being so foolish. I'm not saying I wasn't stupid, but let me just give you guys a story about what happened to me in the past before you guys jump to conclusions about me. 5 years ago, when I was 20, I started dating this guy from college who seemed to be really into me. He was a lot better looking than I was, but he was still into me for some reason. We dated for almost a year and a half, but then I caught him cheating on me in my own apartment with a friend of mine. I broke up with him on the spot, but instead of being apologetic, he made fun of me, my looks, my weight, and even my family before he finally left. He reminded me of all my insecurities and then told me that he was too good for me anyway. It took me years to build up my self-esteem after that, and then, of course, when I met my soon-to-be ex, who practically worshipped the ground I walked on, I didn't think twice and committed to him because, in my head, I wasn't worthy of any love at all. So, that's what had happened in the past, and I hope that now some of you guys can make sense of why I've been ignoring all the red flags that seemed so obvious right from the beginning. I'd been willing to ignore it all because, after ages, I'd finally thought I had found a guy who loved me for who I was. Of course, it turned out not to be true, but while I was with him, I believed it and was ready to do whatever it took to be with him and make him stay. It's desperate, but that's what my last relationship did to me. I've just never had a good relationship with myself, and that's led to a lot of heartbreaks for me, this being the biggest one. So, please think twice before you just say that I deserve this. I didn't, and neither does anyone else because this feels like crap. On a better note, I did get back to my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. I finally opened some of the emails and texts that she'd sent me in the past before the letter and realized that she'd attached contact info to those messages. So, I reached out to her to thank her and tell her about the divorce a few days back. We've been in touch since then, and she's promised to convince my husband's ex-girlfriend to provide evidence that I'd been lied to about my husband's past to make the divorce easier. I just do not want him to get any alimony, which might happen because he'll certainly demand it. He has barely any income in comparison to me, so I don't know. I might have to pay him. My attorney has promised me that it's unlikely, but you never really know. I recently moved out of the hotel and back in with my parents, who have been so supportive ever since I told them about the divorce. My husband doesn't know that I'm back here, but I had no other option. I can't go back home because he's still there, and the hotel was getting too expensive for me. He's responded to the petition, and he's demanding that I let him keep the money from our joint account in the settlement, which is absolutely not acceptable to me. We're meeting a mediator in a few days to start negotiating, but I don't think he stands a chance. Even my mother-in-law has been really kind and helpful. My parents expressed their thankfulness towards her when she visited the other day along with my husband's ex-girlfriend and their son. It was so weird to meet them all in my house. It felt like some strange illegal crossover, but they were nice enough, even though it was very awkward for all of us involved. She brought along sufficient proof to show that it was indeed my husband who was the father of their child, and it was satisfactory enough for both my attorney and me. After we were done with legal stuff, my mother-in-law told us about how her husband and her son had both been good-for-nothing idiots their entire lives. Her husband, my father-in-law, had relied on her income for most of his life because she was a lot more successful than he was. He'd been a failed copywriter in his time, just like his son was a failure as a graphic designer right now, and had relied on her, a restaurant manager. At least I earned more than her and could support him, but she didn't make enough to carry her deadbeat husband and no good son. So, there were already enough problems for her to deal with without also having to worry about her son's weird knack for getting women to give him money. There were a lot of things that forced her to abandon her family, but her adult son scamming women with promises of relationships and love just for money, and her husband supporting this like a sustainable and ethical business idea, is what drove her over the edge, which was fair enough. It would drive anyone over the edge, if I'm being honest. After she left, she didn't have any contact with her son and husband until his ex-girlfriend got pregnant. She's the one who helped track him down along with the cops, and he's always been mad at her for forcing him to take accountability and be a responsible dad to the child he'd helped bring into this world. His girlfriend also seemed like a nice, capable, and independent woman. They were all sympathetic towards me, and it felt great to be understood for once instead of judged. My soon-to-be ex-husband and I met the mediator today, and the meeting did not go over well for him. My attorney brought up all the lies he told me over the years with proof, so the scales are pretty much tilted in my favor right now. I came back home feeling quite victorious, but that feeling didn't last long because, within minutes of my return, my husband was also at my door. He'd followed me home and looked furious. I refused to open the door to him, and my parents threatened to call the cops on him, but he stayed and told me that I had no right to bring up his son here because he had nothing to do with our relationship. It was so ridiculous, I almost opened the door just to slap some sense into him, but I stopped myself just in time. After I threatened to call the authorities, he finally backed off and departed the scene, but not without unleashing his frustration in one last act of pettiness. He slammed his foot into the door with all his might. What a foolish move on his part, it only ended up bruising his own toes, while the sturdy door remained unscathed. Then again, that's par for the course with someone as dim-witted as him. I never held high expectations for intelligence or restraint from a man like that. In the wake of this unsettling encounter, my family has taken proactive steps to bolster the safeguards around our home. Now that he's aware of my whereabouts, there's no doubt in my mind that he'll exhaust every possible avenue to harass and disrupt my peace. I can't fathom what twisted satisfaction he derives from these childish outbursts, but his history of explosive rages mirrors the behavior of so many unreliable, worthless individuals who've squandered their potential. It's hardly a shock that he'd stoop to such levels. My legal counsel has been crystal clear on the next steps. Should he dare to reach out or encroach on my space once more, I must document every detail meticulously. This will fortify our position in the ongoing legal proceedings against him, providing irrefutable proof of his persistent misconduct. Moreover, it would establish sufficient grounds to petition for a protective order, compelling him to maintain a strict distance from me indefinitely. I view this as a prudent and necessary measure, one that could finally grant me the breathing room I deserve. While I sincerely hope he comes to his senses and refrains from any further antics, realism dictates that I prepare for the worst. If he does escalate things, I'll be ready with my phone or any recording device at hand, capturing the evidence needed to streamline the process of obtaining that restraining order. It's empowering to know I have these tools at my disposal, turning potential threats into leverage for my safety and justice. The chapter of my marriage has officially closed. The divorce was sealed just a few days ago, and as of this moment, I stand proudly as a woman unbound by those chains. In a satisfying twist of fate, he walked away without a dime in spousal support, his web of deceptions unraveled completely, leaving him empty-handed. On the contrary, it's he who now owes me restitution for the years of financial and emotional investment I poured into our life together, a debt that feels like a small victory in reclaiming what was mine. What a relief, a true cause for celebration. Amidst this transition, I've maintained a close bond with his mother and his former partner. We've formed an unlikely but invaluable alliance, akin to a sisterhood forged in shared trials. We exchange messages regularly, offering encouragement and empathy, much like participants in a dedicated support circle. Encountering these remarkable women has been a silver lining in the storm. They've provided unwavering solidarity, complementing the steadfast backing from my parents and closest confidants. With their insights and my loved ones' encouragement, I've navigated the turbulence with greater resilience than I ever imagined possible. In a bold step toward independence, I've relocated to a cozy apartment of my own, embracing the solitude that comes with starting anew. There's an undercurrent of apprehension in this change. Living alone for the first time in years stirs a mix of excitement and unease, like stepping into uncharted territory after a long journey. Yet, the knowledge that he has no clue about my new address brings a profound sense of liberation. The building itself is a fortress of modern security, keycard access, surveillance cameras at every corner, on-site staff vigilant around the clock, and even a gated entry that deters any unwelcome visitors. These features ease my concerns considerably, allowing me to settle in without the constant shadow of fear looming over me. As I unpack boxes and arrange my space, I find myself reflecting on how far I've come, from the suffocating grip of that toxic union to this fresh beginning. It's not just about physical distance, it's a mental and emotional reset, a deliberate choice to rebuild on my terms. Looking ahead, I'm contemplating a more public stance once the dust fully settles on the divorce, perhaps after the financial arrangements are ironed out and the papers are beyond dispute. Sharing my story openly feels like a moral imperative. No one should endure the manipulation, the gaslighting, the relentless erosion of self-worth that define my experience. By bringing it to light, I aim to expose the patterns of behavior that predators like him rely on, to warn others and perhaps even inspire those still trapped in similar cycles. Naming and shaming isn't about vengeance, it's about accountability, about ensuring that his actions don't fade into obscurity where they can harm again. Society needs these narratives to evolve, to foster empathy and systemic change. In the meantime, I'll focus on nurturing my new routine: mornings with coffee on the balcony overlooking the city, evenings lost in books or hobbies long neglected, and weekends spent with friends who remind me of my worth. This phase of singlehood isn't just survival, it's rediscovery, a canvas waiting for the vibrant strokes of a life unencumbered. With each passing day, the scars heal a little more, replaced by the quiet strength of knowing I've emerged not broken, but transformed.